Hi everyone, my name is Siobhan McGuinness. I'm one of the consultant anaesthetists here at the National Maternity Hospital. This is a quick reference guide video to donning and doffing personal protective equipment. It's meant to supplement that already released by the infection control team here, and I encourage you all to watch it to make sure that you feel confident when donning and doffing your personal protective equipment. We know that PPE is a really important part of keeping ourselves and our colleagues safe when we're looking after patients with respiratory illnesses, and it's really important to be methodical. We have a flow chart released by the HSC and supported by the hospital to use. Use it to keep yourself safe, to work through methodically when you're putting on and taking off your PPE. It's also really useful, particularly for the first few times or in any emergencies, to use a buddy system where someone keeps an eye on you while you're putting it on and taking it off, donning or doffing. When we're donning our PPE, we're doing so outside the patient's room in the yellow zone. There are 5 steps to donning PPE. The first is decontaminating your hands, using an alcohol hand gel, which should be available to you, making sure you've covered all the areas. The second step is donning your gown. We're using surgical gowns here. They need to be long sleeve, below the knee, and water resistant. When you put on your gown, the most important things are making sure you've done up the Velcro at the top, and that you've done up the tie at the side. Tying it at the side will make it easier to take it off later on. The next step is putting on your mask. We're using surgical face masks for the vast majority of patient contacts. The only time an N95 or PPR3 mask is required is when you're performing an aerosol generating procedure, such as intubation, suctioning, chest physio, or manual ventilation. When placing on your mask, make sure you have a really good seal across the top of your nose and tie the bands on top. If you have a ponytail, I'd recommend you tie both bands on top. It's going to make removal much easier later on. You want to make sure you have a good seal across the bottom of your chin so that there's minimal air leak around the edges. Perfect. The next step is putting on your goggles. And lastly, our surgical gloves. We're using surgical gloves to make sure that we're covering the cuff of the gown to minimise contamination, to keep ourselves safe. I'm now ready to enter the patient's room. Now that I've finished my patient contact, I'm ready to doff. Doffing is a high-risk procedure in terms of contamination. It's important to remember that the front of your body and your palms are likely to be the areas that have been in contact with the patient and are more likely to have viral shedding. The first part of doffing takes place inside the patient's room or in the red zone. The first step is to remove your gloves, being mindful of the fact that the front of your gloves are the part of the gloves most likely to have patient contact. We remove our gloves from the back, curling them into each other, trying to stay inside the glove. We then immediately dispose into the healthcare waste in the room. The next step is to decontaminate our hands at this point. The second step is removing our goggles, being careful to use the outside bars to take them off. They also go into the healthcare waste. The next step is removal of the gown. And this is a really important part of the procedure, and I caution you all to be really methodical and take your time. We're going to release the Velcro at the top with our clean hands and release the tie at the side. We're then going to have our hands on the inside of the gown to pull it forward and down and roll it away from the body. We're rolling it in on itself to keep all the viral shedding on the inside of the gown and immediately disposing of it in the healthcare waste. At this point, it's really important to decontaminate your hands. At this point in time, we're ready to leave the patient room or leave the red zone. It's really important when you do so that you close the door behind you and we take the mask off outside. Now that I've left the patient's room and shut the door behind me, I'm ready to take off my mask. Using the ties at the very top, we're going to undo them, keeping a hold of them, and then allow the mask to fall away from our face, immediately discarding into the healthcare waste. The last step is then to decontaminate your hands again, either with soap and water if immediately available, or the alcohol garbage can jar. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope this gives you a bit more information so that you feel armed and ready to look after yourselves and your colleagues when we're looking after these patients. Thanks very much.